Hello, and welcome to The Black Unconscious,
a mental health podcast about living, coping, and thriving while Black.
I'm Raquel Martin, a PhD candidate in medical and clinical psychology.
And I'm Dr. Justin Hopkins, a licensed clinical psychologist.
This podcast is not meant to be a substitute for a therapeutic relationship with a licensed therapist.
Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome to The Black Unconscious. I am Raquel Martin.
And I am Dr. Justin Hopkins.
And today we are talking about cultural appropriation, specifically appropriation versus appreciation. This episode is entitled Beware of the Culture Vultures. Dang, I couldn't even say it right.
It's all right. Beware of the culture vultures.
Yeah.
Cultural appropriation. Yeah, that is kind of a tongue tie. So we wanted to talk about this because while on the surface it does seem like a rather benign topic as it relates to mental health, but it's not. It's absolutely not. And when you think of cultural appropriation, really what happens there is that there are people with a certain amount of privilege, particularly white people, who are praised, applauded, and given all sorts of accolades and acknowledgement for certain things that have historically been attributed to other groups, while those groups were being demeaned, talked down to, ostracized, and stigmatized for those exact same things. And so, of course, that affects the mental health and the self-concept of Black people and Black communities and Black families. And so we want to give that some pause and talk about that today.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing to look at, because I do think there's a difference between appropriation and appreciation. Yeah. Because I heard Francesca Ramsey say it best when she had a talk on this, and she said cultural appropriation is like taking a test and getting an F on that test, and then somebody else takes that test and not only gets an A for the same exact test, but they get extra credit for it. It's like you're taking what belongs to an individual person, and I do feel like you can appreciate it. You can take the time to talk about the roots of where it came from and things like that. But I think appropriation gets to the point where you act like someone's culture is an accessory.
Right. So appreciation is, as you kind of like said it, is when you acknowledge where it comes from, the origin of that particular thing, whether it be a style of music, a style of dress, hair, specifically like cornrows or body features. When it's acknowledged that it comes from a particular group or it originated from that group, then it's considered appreciation.
Yeah, because like even the hair thing is like a really big thing to me, because it is something like, so they have hair bands at different places, and I see it affecting Black individuals the most. So this may affect other cultures, but I only know, and I will only speak to my culture because that's where I'm limited, and hate being wrong, don't want to be embarrassed. So like with braids, there were a lot of places, like, so I go to a military school. So the military, the Army specifically, I think just lifted the hair ban on locks, right? Mm-hmm. So like Black women were not allowed to wear locks or braids and stuff like that. And Army was the last one to do it. I believe Air Force already did it, and Navy did it as well. And then in addition to that, you have schools where little girls are being sent home for their hair. Right. Like for having braids. Kentucky sent kids home and had it actually part of their conduct policy that you couldn't have braids, afros, or locks because it was distracting.
Right, and this all is clearly Black styles of
all
hair.
Clearly Black styles of hair, right? Because you're not seeing this on any other people. You are, but that's more so in the appropriation piece that we're going to talk about. And then also a Florida school threatened to expel a young lady because of her natural hair. And she was 12 years old. Her name was Vanessa Van Dyke. So like it's ridiculous how it's just another way of trying to keep individuals down without specifically stating the individuals. It's like when individuals are talking about Black people and they have this habit of saying like what is it, urban, or they'll say like if it's in politics they'll say like specifically welfare, which by the way, or like WIC or whatever, we are actually not the majority who use those services. We're not the majority anywhere, except unfortunately in prisons. But we're not the majority who use welfare. So like, haha to you morons who keep saying it because you're insulting your own people. Because those are the people who normally say it. But yeah, hair is a big thing. Or I know there was this big outrage when who was it? It was one of them. I think it was Kim Kardashian. It was probably one of her sisters at one point in time too. But they said that, you know, she's using a cultural appropriation by wearing Bo Derek braids. First of all, they are not Bo Derek braids. So like, let's get that straight right here. Like that was like, so if we technically they were using like the first cultural appropriation. I don't even think they knew that that's what they were doing. They were just like, oh, Bo Derek braids. But those are cornrows, and there's so much historic aspect with that. Like you see like ancient Egyptians and like hieroglyphics having braids. It's the fact that like back in slavery they used to use them as maps. It's the fact that, you know, it was one way to make sure that our hair was, you know, our hair wasn't well taken care of. So one of the ways to keep it up was to braid it. It's just, you know, it's our culture and it's embedded in our history. And for individuals, and this is where the appropriation gets into it, for individuals where Black girls and Black women aren't allowed to wear these hairstyles at work or at school or things like that, and then you have a white person wear them and then they get praised for the individuality, that's where the appropriation comes from. Like, we're doing the same thing, but you get praised for it and I do not. So that, and not only do I not get praised for it, I get punished for it. So it's just another way of showing that no matter, honestly, showing why some people would feel like no matter what I do, it's not going to be good enough, because I can do the same thing as the person next to me. The only difference is this person is white, I'm getting kicked out of school and they're not. Right.
I like to think of it as plagiarism.
Yeah.
It's like plagiarism, and it's the worst kind because the original person was never actually acknowledged in the first place. It's like you stole someone's work and got the credit for it, and that person never got the credit in the first place. So it's actually even worse than plagiarism. At least with plagiarism, there's an original text, and usually someone's been acknowledged for it.
Well, no, that's when you're plagiarizing, when you don't acknowledge them.
Well, they may have been not have been acknowledged by the person who stole it, but they're like, at least somebody acknowledged them. Like for us though, like they're like all those examples that you gave, right? America says to us like these like purely like Black cultural things are wrong, right? Yeah. So we're not even getting acknowledged for like or we're not often accepted for or invited to be our authentic selves in most spaces in America. And so to see other people, to see white people, to see the privilege that they have, and to get the kind of accolades that they get and the kind of welcome that they receive for doing things that we have been historically demeaned for is really hard. It's another one of those micro and macro messages that gets communicated to us that says like, hey, Black is wrong, white is good. And so you can do this, Black man, Black woman, but you're going to get kicked down, stomped on. You're going to get sent home from school. You're going to be told to change up. You're going to be told to be more white. But if a white person does the same exact thing, then it's accepted. And so it's one of those things that I think it does really cut deep in terms of like identity, in terms of our own self-validation, in terms of how we view our own worth. It's one of those things that really does kind of continuously communicate to us that it's just not okay to be an authentic Black person.
Yeah, and it doesn't just happen with hair. Like I think of hair the most because I just remember hearing countless stories about young Black women getting kicked out of school or being told they couldn't participate in extracurricular activities, and it was such a big deal. But it also happens with music. Like, so who do you think is like the king of rock and roll? If you like automatically, who would you say is the king of rock and roll?
Oh, I'm not a big rock and roll person, so I can't say. But
who would you think people would say?
Right, Elvis.
Elvis, right?
Right.
Chuck Berry is the king of freaking rock and roll. Okay, period. There is like Elvis is not the king of rock and roll. Yeah. Google him if you don't know who he is. Shame on you. But Chuck Berry is the king of rock and roll. I remember having a conversation with someone and they were like, "Oh, you know, the king of rock and roll," and I was like, "Oh, you're talking about Chuck Berry?" They were like, "Who?" I was like, "Oh, I'm confused. Why you're confused?" Because they'd never even heard of Chuck Berry before.
Well, it happens everywhere. Specifically in music, though, like it happens in every single genre. We see artists. For example, when Macklemore won Album of the Year over Kendrick Lamar.
Oh my God!
I think he beat out. What album was it that he beat out? Was it To Pimp a Butterfly?
I don't even. Was it To Pimp a Butterfly?
I'm not sure.
Google quicker.
I'm trying.
There's no reason. And so Macklemore also, he actually does give. So he's a separate story because he actually does give props to every single Black person. He's actually also spoke out about the fact that like he thinks it's crazy that he gets more accolades for things versus Black people and stuff like that. So he has spoken out about that. He
has, and that's why I don't actually feel like Macklemore himself was appropriating culture.
No, I don't think so.
He actually reached out to Kendrick and said, "Hey, you got robbed."
Yeah,
and I think he's also like he's one of those people that also like cites a lot of other artists that he's really grown up on and certain aspects of hip hop culture that he's really enjoyed, and he's kind of really immersed himself in the culture. But I do think for the people who are deciding those awards,
yes, that's where it comes in, right?
There's a larger appreciation for certain talents, certain skills, certain aesthetics, and certain like style of dress and way of being when a white person is presenting those things versus when a Black person is.
Yeah, and so I don't know how much you would know about this, but I just recently.
It was Good Kid, Mad City, by the way.
Oh, I mean.
That's the best album. That's his best album.
Hell no. That album was such a good. Yeah, you probably should turn down your volume. My bad. That album was such it just was so good, front to back. Play the entire thing front to back. I actually want to hear the what are they called? The things that are in between the songs, but they're not songs.
Interludes.
I actually want to hear the interludes.
The
like,
interludes
are you
are
kidding me? And I actually listen to Macklemore's whole album because I actually like the fact that he talks about his battle with alcoholism and his substance abuse disorder. So I appreciate the fact that he's always transparent with that. So I've heard both albums, both at least like 3. My rule is like I have to hear it 3 times before I can make a comment. Always. So I've heard them both 3 times. And Good Kid, Mad City is 10 times better. But there was also I saw a shirt that let me look it up. It was talking about cultural appropriation, but it was talking about Black women and gay white men. So it was saying that gay white men get credit for acting like Black women. Like they're taking the culture from Black women when it came to the slang and the terms and all this stuff like that. And I don't really know. I don't know how I feel about that. Like, what are your thoughts on that? I don't know if you...
So I've never heard of that before.
Really?
Ever. Yeah. I've never, ever heard of that. What is that about?
Well, okay, so I don't know how much stuff you watch. So you don't watch. I'm assuming you don't watch like. I don't want to assume actually. Have you heard of the show Pose?
No.
Oh Jesus. Okay. What about RuPaul's Drag Race?
I haven't.
Okay, so
I've heard good things about RuPaul's Drag Race though.
Yeah, cause she won. What's the TV award? She won a TV award. I think it's an Emmy. I'm not sure, but it's because of like the slang terms and like the so you got the slang terms and you have individuals who are dressing up in drag. They also have like the padding to make sure they got enough like booty and like boobs and stuff like that and all that. And I think where most of it comes from is the slang terms, is where individuals are concerned that like they're getting cultural appropriation.
So this is completely new to me. So like what are some of the slang terms?
Okay, so it's not just slang. They'll do stuff like pop their mouth and stuff like that, which like, I mean, who do you think of when you hear the popping of the mouth? Like Craig, where like, where Craig at? But like the popping of the mouth. And then it's also, I think some of the, I think it's more of the mannerisms that they're concerned with that get taken away. And the first time I heard that, I was like, man, I don't know. I didn't really think about it that way, but there's also the fact that I never feel like, so I'm in the group of Black women, right? But I'm like incredibly privileged as like a cisgendered, and if I believed in like, specific ideology, whatever, is a heterosexual woman or whatever. So I feel like coming from that place of privilege, I don't know how I really feel about commenting on that, which is kind of like, why did I bring it up? But I just thought about it as soon as I said it. It's just because I don't really feel like I'm in that group. I can see where they're coming from with it.
In other words, you can understand someone's feelings about being ostracized for certain behaviors, habits, body language.
Yeah, like stank walks, big booties, like, door knocker earrings. Like, I can understand that, but I don't know the historical context of, like, I only know the historical context of, like, my culture to a certain extent. So it's like, I never, when someone was asking me to talk about it, I was like, oh, really? I don't know how I feel about that, because I don't really know as much about that culture.
So part of what you're saying is, like, so some people may feel like certain aspects of culture are appropriated, but you don't necessarily, even if that includes, like, black women, right? If what's being appropriated is from black women, you may not necessarily identify with all of the things that are being appropriated.
Yeah, and I also, like, just going off of my experience, I can see where people get that from. I'll be honest, like, with just specific, like,
well, people get what from?
Like, thinking that it's appropriated from black women. Like, I can get that. Like, the way, I don't know if they call us sassy, I don't know, but the way it's portrayed and the way that I've engaged with some individuals that were white gay men, like, it's like they kind of gravitate towards a certain demeanor, and the demeanor can be very familiar to that of a black woman.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying all of them. I'm just saying certain ones that I've come into contact with. And it could also be the fact that certain ways that individuals are portrayed in media, like maybe that's the kind of role that they're asking people to play.
Right. Right. To be, well, there is overlap in those stereotypes, right?
And that's the thing, right? Because there's an overlap.
The stereotype of a black woman that grows up in an inner city community, and that of a privileged white man, and it's like a privileged white gay man.
Yeah, and also there's. I'm sorry.
Well, no, I was just gonna say, like, it's kind of interesting that there can be a little overlap in that, but I guess I never thought about it until this point.
Yeah, and I think there's also stereotypes in the way that gay men are portrayed, the way that white gay men are portrayed, black gay men, Asian gay men, like just
sure.
So it's all based on stereotypes. So when I first read that, when I was thinking about the episode, I was like, I don't know. I don't really know how I feel about it. I know how I feel individually. I can see why there is concern, basically.
I think for me, I'm putting on my clinician hat, not that I ever really take it off. But I don't necessarily, like, I can't identify with everything that every black person feels like is being appropriated.
Yeah.
But what I can say is I can acknowledge and appreciate the feeling of being ostracized for something and seeing others be praised for it. And that's hard. To feel like what you naturally do, who you naturally are, is put down, stomped on, and told that it's not okay, or it's associated with all of these negative things. But to see other people and other people groups do the exact same thing, and to receive fame for it, or to get certain roles in Hollywood for it, or whatever the case may be, to see them reap the benefits of that, I think that's really hard.
Yeah, and I think that's where outrage comes from.
Right.
And I think that's where the outrage is within that specific community. Right. Like, if it's coming from black women, or if it's coming from, black men, it's just the outrage is where it just stems from, a feeling like I did the same thing someone else did, and yet I'm just not valid enough for it to matter, for it to be deemed fashion, for it to be deemed artistry, for it to be deemed style, or anything like that, just because of just of who I am as a person.
Right, because if it's deemed right.
Well, it's slang. I'm sorry, it was slang, because the Green Box Shop has a shirt, and I love their stuff. It says gay slang was invented by white women, and it's crossed out gay men, and it's crossed out drag queens, and then it's crossed out, and then it says black women. So I think, like, if you identify slang as culture, which most people do, right?
Sure, right. Yeah, that stuff is interesting. I think what really highlights like cultural appropriation is that there is, and the pain associated with it is that I think it's a very common Black experience to feel like America loves Black culture, but not Black people.
Yeah, because Amandla said that, right?
What's that?
Amandla said that on one of her posts.
Perhaps, I'm not sure, but I've seen that so many times, and I've also, we also experienced it in a very tangible way, and so, and it's this kind of experience of like the things that you have to offer, your essence, your talents, your abilities. Like, we'll take that, right? We'll take your cool, we'll take your swag,
because we are a culture. Period.
Black folks, we do set the standard for what's like cool and culture. Like, that is like our fingerprint is absolutely on that when it comes to American society. What is popular and culturally relevant and I think sells, a lot of the times it's these things that are typically come from Black culture. But at the same time, so they America like loves Black culture but fears Black people, and that is a conundrum. And if you, I mean, that, like, next to the word objectification in the dictionary should be like that quote: loving Black culture but fearing Black people.
Yeah, there's always I see the quote coming around all the time about if only they loved our culture as much as they loved us.
Yeah. J. Cole actually has a really, really great verse about this. And he cites a lot of the things that we talked about. So he cites Elvis, he cites Macklemore, and a few others.
You got to rap it.
I got to rap it?
Yeah.
I'm going to rap it. real quick.
Because I know the verse you're talking about.
Yeah, so
you got to rap it. You got to use hand gestures, too. Like, I want to see, like, you on the stage.
So it's in this album, 2014 Forest Hills Drive. And it's this song, Firing Squad. And towards like the second half of the song, he goes, history repeats itself and that's just how it goes. Same way that these rappers always bite each other's flows. The same thing that this dude Elvis did with rock and roll, Justin Timberlake, Eminem, and then Macklemore. While silly dudes argue over who gonna snatch the crown, look around, my dude, white people have snatched the sound. This year I'll probably go to the awards dapper down, watch Iggy win a Grammy as I try to crack a smile. I'm just playing, but all good jokes contain true shit. The same rope you climb up on, they'll hang you with.
It's pretty good. First of all, that was a great job.
Thank you.
So
but
look, we're
like,
gonna
right,
have to have a repeat. I'm just
but right there, right? Like right there, he like that last line that I said, right? The same rope you climb up on, they'll hang you with.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much in that one verse. I mean, music expresses far beyond what I think like words can just grasp in isolation of the context of sound and cadence.
Especially because music is always a representation of what is going on in the time. So I think you can also see, I don't know what's going to happen when they come back and see trap music. They're going to be like, what the, like, they were going through some times. All they were doing was, sleeping with bitches and selling drugs. Like, that's what their culture was. Like, because that's all the songs are about. But like back then,
right, misogyny layered with more misogyny and like 4 more layers of like misogyny. Yeah, that was. I'm
not gonna lie, like those be bangers though. Like misogyny with a good beat, I'd be like, hey, like I'm selling drugs.
This is coming from the same woman that has a male tears mug.
Yeah, and I'm just saying, like, just very dehydrated. Always need male tears to quench my thirst. But I mean, I'm just saying, like, all my favorite. Like, just I'm not gonna listen to them. Like, I take them for what they are, but they be having the best beats. Like those, like, are you kidding me? I played Back That Ass Up at my wedding as like a first dance. Actually, it's like a joke, like for real. Pissed my husband off, but it is a representation of the time. So I understand where he's coming from, and I like the ones that he named, like Eminem, for example, I think is an amazing rapper, one of my top 5. But they give credit to it. But the problem is when like the media, like everyone else isn't giving them credit. So like it's one thing if you're giving them credit for like having roots in that, but the media doesn't do that, right? Because there was also a thing, right. There was uproar about Adele's album. Which do you listen to Adele?
I do. I actually went to her concert a long time ago. Yeah, it was like a couple years ago.
I can't. Yeah. Well, yeah. So I love her. You got lucky.
I did.
And there was uproar when her album came out about how many awards she had won. And they were like, Adele is like R&B, soul, and stuff like that, but the fact that she is white gives her more, like, that's why, because it gives them our culture, but it gives it to them in a way that they find more digestible, like that they're fine with.
Right. It's hard because Adele, I think, is one of the most amazing singers of our generation. Honestly, I really do. But it's what I don't think you can deny, right, is that, and Macklemore has said this, Adele may have actually acknowledged this as well, because she's pretty progressive and pretty woke herself.
I really do hate that. I really do hate that word you keep using it. But
what's that?
Yeah, woke. Yeah.
Okay, I did use it last episode.
Yeah,
we're gonna have to argue about that.
I just feel like it's like, am I asleep? It's just, it's just every time. Like, I don't know how many times. Like, is it every episode we're gonna realize we hate each other's words? Like, it's like, well, damn, what word don't
probably.
You like today, Raquel? What word is annoying you today? The
probably.
word the. I don't like the way you say the.
But what I really mean is that, like, she's
no, I get
aware,
what you're saying.
right?
She gives credit where it's due. Like, I feel you when it like that.
But I think I guess the thing that the thing that's hard, right, is like is that there's a certain, and this is what Macklemore acknowledged, right? Like, when it comes to certain awards and accolades, there is a certain privilege that white artists have by being white, because the people that are going to be giving those accolades and those awards, they feel the music, the artistry is more palatable to them, more accessible to them. It reaches audiences that other black artists don't have the privilege of reaching. And so there's a leg up when it comes to the amount of awards some of these artists win. Now, yeah. I don't know if that's the case for Adele, but it's not beyond reason, right, to consider her whiteness or whiteness as it plays in anything, or race as it plays in anything. I actually get really frustrated when we get into the nitpicking of, like, how do you know it's race or not? Because, like, I think the point is missed. It's not that you can ever really, really know for sure whether race is a part of a particular issue. It's not about knowing for sure. It's the fact that you have to consider it, and the fact that you have to consider it is obviously another burden. It's another cognitive burden, thinking about how race played into whether someone was acknowledged or not. It's another thing that people of color always have to consider: the color of their skin and how that plays into whether they're being cheated out of something they feel like they deserve, not being rewarded for something they feel like they should be rewarded for, being overlooked for that next position. So whether it's the case or not, really kind of looking at whether it's true or not, I think undermines the issue of of the fact that, like, race is a part of our society, and we respond to people's stimulus value, the whole package, whether that includes the color of their skin, obviously, their hair color, their stature. It includes everything, and we make unconscious decisions or conscious ones based off of that all of the time. And so it's not beyond the scope of conversation to consider how race plays in any sort of situation, or gender, or any other kind of aspect of identity.
Yeah, because I can't see that not coming to pass in any instance of things like that. And I think there are different ways to do it. Like, so you can pay homage and appreciate things, and there's nothing wrong with, like, stating where it's from, or even, like, giving profits to it. I think there was this one show, this fashion show, right? And they specifically used just designs and stuff that were based off of this tribe. And because of that, they not only paid homage to the tribe during the runway show, they also let everyone know about it, provided education, and gave proceeds to it. So you're clearly showing appreciation, because not only am I, acknowledging where I got this, just these amazing designs from, but I'm also showing that I care about the tribe. I'm trying to give money back to it. Like, there are ways to do it. And you should also realize that one way to really show appreciation, I'm not saying like have a token member of that society or whatever like that, but employ people who are doing that. Like if you what's wrong with employing like a black braider to do something that, like if you want braids to be featured on a runway show, or what's wrong with, I don't know, featuring black people with braids on the runway show, stuff like that. Like,
in other words, include us in the celebration of things that were originally ours to begin with.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you really want to appreciate our culture, why don't you advocate for us? Why don't you advocate for us in ways other than our culture?
Yeah.
Like, culture is one, it's everything. It's, but the certain aspect of culture that you're using is one sect of who we are. Like if you're, looking into the music piece or the art piece, like you can't appreciate the individual with not also acknowledging the struggle that they go through every day. And in that sense, you can advocate for us. You need the good with the bad, so if you notice like, oh, I love this culture so much, instead of just taking that aspect of it, also look at other aspects of the culture. Think about how we're marginalized. Think about the systematic racism. Think about that aspect and contribute to that, because unfortunately, it takes someone who is, we're out there fighting every single day, but it's unfortunate that it takes someone who is not a minority to speak out. Like you can have a black person and a white person talking about the same thing and use your privilege to help us out. Like you shouldn't even need to, but the fact that you understand that you have that privilege, do that. Like if you wanna use our music and use our hairstyles, go to a march. Help us with policy. Contribute to funds that mentor black youth. Like do that. Like I feel like that needs to be the way to pay your way in. If you want to use one of our beats, if you want to sample Ray Charles, I'm gonna need some coins. So you can either donate it to the Shakura Foundation. You could that's your way in. So not only do you have to pay to sample it, but you need to donate to our community in some way, shape, or form.
I do think one of the difference between like a culture vulture and someone who's just like appreciating. So the difference between like someone who actually participates in cultural appropriation and someone who doesn't is the person who's able to acknowledge their privilege.
Yeah.
As a white person, as a member of the majority, and recognize this really the subtle, and to me it's explicit. I think to a lot of black folks it's explicit. To a lot of white folks it may not be as obvious because they don't necessarily have to think of their whiteness as much. And I think black folks know more about whiteness than most white folks, to be honest, because we have to think about race.
And it's also taught to us every single day.
Yeah.
Black history is an afterthought, and for some reason it always starts with slavery. I can tell you when Columbus sailed the ocean blue in like a second. Because our stuff has always been secondary to them. It's always been primary. Like and it's stuff that like honestly, why would I want to know that? I don't even call it like that day anymore. I call it Indigenous Peoples Day. Ours is always secondary, so it's up to us to know. It's technically a requirement for us to know about their stuff, right? Like ours is an option. Ours is an elective.
Right.
Like all we need to do is let's talk about in February, we got to give them so let's talk about slavery, and then let's talk about, Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. And if we talk about, Harriet Tubman, we got them all. Like that's it. Cause it's an elective. You're right. Cause it's a requirement for us to know their heritage and their culture.
Right. And then on top of that, right. Like, then there's a way in which like celebrating black folks sometimes just feels like it's a task, or it's an inconvenience. Well, I don't necessarily agree with the idea of Black History Month. I think we need it, but I don't like it because I think Morgan Freeman said it best, right? Black history is American history, and it's also like it started off as a week, I think, and then it turned into a month, and it's also the shortest month of the year, and it's just
you should definitely know that it started off as a week because I definitely featured this on our page.
Well, yeah, I said it started off as a week.
Yeah.
It started off as a week.
Negro Week by Carter G. Woodson. Right. And he worked incredibly hard to get it to a month. And I understand where you're coming from, but okay, so this gets to another point. You can't really appreciate something without knowing the history of it, right? Mm-hmm. Like and that's where I think the appropriation part gets to it. Like you don't understand the historical context of braids. So you just think it's an accessory, but to us it's our history. So you think you're just wearing braids, Bo Derek braids. So what you're really wearing is what used to be like a map to the Underground Railroad, or a way for us to keep our hair, kempt when we couldn't get shampoo and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So for like the Black History Month piece, I would say anyone who understood like the work that Carter G. Woodson went to get from a week to a month would, one, I get not liking it, but you would appreciate it. Like you can still appreciate it.
No, I certainly appreciate that. I mean, obviously that's progress, right? And we've been making incremental progress our entire, well, I can't say our entire, but as we've fought for progress our entire existence in this country, and we've made incremental progress over time. And I think in this day and age, right, like, so we've got it from a week to a month, and obviously, yeah, that's worthy of tons of appreciation and tons of acknowledgement. But I would personally like to see us get to a point where we don't necessarily have to relegate our history to one particular month. It can be a part of American history celebrated over the course of the year, like all other amazing days in history. Like Juneteenth should be a national holiday. I just think that there are just certain things that we can do to like better integrate like African American history and striving our culture and our history into the normal everyday life and everyday standards of American culture, and that's just one of them. So I don't know, that's just my thought about it. But I do appreciate that there is a month that we get to celebrate, but we should always be able to celebrate because it's American history. It shouldn't be relegated to just 1 month.
Yeah, I don't think with the month is not the only month that we can celebrate. I think that's when we get some extra props. I mean, because honestly, every day you listen to, I don't know, country music or rap music or, I don't know, where you're hearing braids. Like every day to me is Black History Day. I think I like the aspect of the month because it brings more attention to the amazing accolades. Like it's more overt. Like then, because I think every day is Black History Day. Like every day we over here making money moves, and darn it, Cardi. Every day we making moves. It came so smoothly too, like making money moves. But
you and I also make a point of actually on Fridays on our Instagram page. We always do Friday facts. And
yes, and they always gonna be about Black people.
Yeah, they're almost always some sort of like Black history shout out. We try to do like different things that we've that aren't always that common. For example, there's a whole nother African American museum in DC. It's over in Anacostia, and there's a couple of others that you and Raquel, you started.
There's a museum of the African diaspora in California. I did not know this. The reason why I found this out is because everyone's at APA, and my friend was like, "Oh, I'm at the Museum of African Diaspora." I was like, "What? How have I not been to this museum? This is insane!" Like, there's so much out there that we don't even like see. I had never heard of this museum, and plus, Baltimore got the Blacks and Wax Museum. I went to that museum like 1,000,000 times as a child. My mom played no games when it came to our culture, so like I could probably tell. I'll never forget. She lost her. Was it her Versace glass? It was these one like name brand nice glasses that she lost there one day, and she will never forget it. But yeah, there's plenty of ways to appreciate it. I think the best way to do it is to, so how do you do appropriation versus appreciation? Know the historical context of what you're appropriating. Give credit where credit is due. Try to lift as you climb, because y'all climbing real. Certain people are climbing very fast. Lift as you climb. Like Angela Davis said that. Like you should always lift as you climb. Help people out. Right. Don't think that it's just enough to like give name to it and like say it. You can always like show appreciation by like giving people shout outs. You can also show appreciation by doing something for the culture as well, like contributing to the culture.
Don't just reap the benefits of the culture, but also contribute to the culture as well. So this is answering the question. There's a large question of basically like how do you and you posed that question, Raquel, like how do you like address the culture vultures, or how do you decrease cultural appropriation and increase cultural appreciation? Because on some level, right, you do want like some of our culture to be normalized. Like part of the reason why some of these young women are being kicked out of school for natural hair is because, to me, I think there's an unconscious fear of just uncensored blackness. Like just being your full black self, like just wearing your hair as it is, or just dressing in clothes that are clearly representation of black culture. So to me, there's like.
But why do you think that fear is? I think because people are always afraid of an uprising, and when we no longer embrace European features and things like that, and it's not even European features because straight hair. Here's another myth: straight hair is not solely a white person thing. I saw someone when I was researching this say, "Well, why you wearing your hair straight?" What? Asian people have every other race has straight hair, so they basically said that by flattening and straightening our hair, we're using a cultural appropriation. But I just, and I'm a conspiracy theorist, I think that there's always this fear that we are going to just uprise. And the first start is like, us, not straightening the hair and stuff like that. And like, I think there's like legit this fear. And I can't imagine, I read somewhere once that this conversation between someone, it was probably a meme because I like survive off of those. And the white guy was like, white people are afraid of black people uprising because if you had done to us what we had done to you, we would have reacted extremely different. And I feel like it was even worse words than that. But I think there's always a fear.
Yeah,
like
I think there's a lot. Yeah,
it's like a rebellion. They see natural hair as a rebellion. And this is legit how our hair comes out of our head. I mean, granted, I did add some shea butter to it, but like it's still like the way it comes out of here. I think there's always a fear. Like under everything, I think there's a fear when it comes to like the races.
I think that there's certainly a fear, right? Well, obviously there's the fear of black people, and that's why I think there are these shootings of black men who are unarmed. There's just a heightened level of fear when law enforcement and you have white civilians calling the police on white black folks just doing these normal benign things like barbecuing in a park or a little girl selling water. So
and they also feel like there's not going to get in trouble for it, which is true half the time, which is why I think it's also our job to find them and like, figure it out. Because you have to have, the only way you're going to stop doing things I'm not saying it, don't make your face like that. I'm not saying attack. Like, okay. I'm saying like, okay, when we didn't know the face of the young woman, the woman who, called the cops on one person, people found her and was like, is this someone that she was the head of, like, she was at some aspect of university. And you're like, is this who you want to be in a university that also has minorities? No. So should she be working there? No. I'm not saying find them as like, what's that? What's like, I will find you and I will hunt you down. No, like, but I think we need to bring light to it. We need to, if you're okay with doing this, if you're okay with showing your race, so we'll have your face everywhere. Because if you wanted to be popular, you are popular now. Like, we'll never forget your face. I'm not saying attack them. I'm saying we need to bring light to it because there needs to be some repercussions for doing these things. And there aren't most of the time. That's why they do it. Like, oh, well, the police are my personal service. Like, so if you can see, like, a negative outcome to you doing these things, maybe you'll stop. And I think the negative outcome is when we bring light to these individuals and they get the backlash from it. Don't attack. I'm not saying attack people. Please. I am not saying attack people. I'm just saying I don't think people should be getting away with it. And one way you can do that is by bringing light to what they're doing and who the person is.
Yeah, I agree. And and I think there are a lot of reasons why white Americans tend to fear black bodies. And it is such a strange, I can't even find the words to explain, but it's such a strange experience to be celebrated in one way, like your culture be celebrated and kind of the end thing, but your humanity to be feared. And so there's this humanity gap, I'll call it. Like there's this gap in the level of value we assign to like white humanity versus black humanity. So you can like steal all of the things stealing from black culture is nothing new, right? We know the Greek letters were stolen from Egyptian culture.
Oh, right? I did not know that.
Stolen legacy.
Jeez, okay.
Yep. And so it's not new. Like colonialism is
colonizing mofos,
right? I mean, it's so. I think J. Cole, like that verse that I rapped, like I think he like completely embodies cultural paranoia. It's
the rope hanging you with is the term that like sticks with me,
right? Like the rope that you climb up on, your claim to fame, your unique talents and gifts, your uniqueness as a human being, will actually take that from you, reproduce it, and then we'll use that same thing to ostracize you.
Yeah, especially since this country was built on the back of minorities. period. I really, one day I just want to research all the richest people in this earth and see where they got their money from and trace it back. And I'm just going to tell you, there's going to be some black blood in there. And it just makes me like, you have to dilute it. Like our culture, you just have to dilute it by putting a different face on it. It's also one of the reasons why whenever I see someone, whenever I see someone mention like, oh, you know, in a relationship with someone who's not, like a black person in a relationship with someone who's not black, and they're like, oh, you'll have really cute babies. Like just by adding, you just add a bit of another race, just dilute the black, and we have like amazingness. Like, you know, because I've heard that. Have you ever heard like people like, oh, you'll make really cute babies? I can make cute babies with, you know,
right,
anyone.
Right.
But why is it that when I just dilute it a little bit, right, you know, it's better? You can make cute babies with Jamal too. There's nothing wrong with that. Right. You know, it's just like it seems to me that you have to it's like once we dilute it a little bit, then it'll be more digestible. Then we can appeal to a greater audience. Then we'll make prettier babies. Then they'll have straighter hair. Like we just got to dilute the black a little bit. Yeah. Just a little bit.
I want to like kind of, I feel mixed about doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway. I kind of want to address the person who may be listening and thinking like, does it have to be like this kind of way? Like, does it have to be a thing? Like, why can't I or we like just like wear our hair whatever we want or dress whatever you want? You can, but you also have to understand. Well, I guess you don't have to understand. But if you're listening, then I hope you would take the moment to understand that from the experience of black folks, to be, again, to just be pushed aside, brushed aside, and put down for the same things that you're praised for. And also the fact that whiteness is the standard, right? European beauty standards rule the day. And so if there's one thing, right, and that's why there was a lot of outrage about Shea Moisture when they did the commercials catering to white to their white consumers, because
when we're the reason why Shea Moisture even had the money to pay for that commercial. We're the reason why you had the funds to do that.
And we're in the middle of
before you change the formula, that is, because most people don't use it now.
And we're in the middle of a black hair like renaissance. Like folks are wearing their natural hair. It really is amazing in black women and black men.
And black men, y'all team natural too.
We are.
Yes.
You see me like beard, like curls, like everybody's, you know. And so for the standard of beauty to always have been white. We've talked about the Clark study on this show before. We've talked about how little black boys and little black girls, the doll study, they were choosing the white doll, saying the white doll was more pretty and the good one, and the black doll is the bad one. So if you have to kind of, if you're questioning why we're talking about it in this way, you have to kind of think, if my experience is that everything that I do, even though I see some personal benefit in it, and people who look like me see some merit to it, the majority of America tells me that it's bad and it's wrong. But when somebody else does it that looks different from me, they're right, they're good, they're beautiful, they're stunning, and they get money for it, they get fame for it, they get prestige for it, they get all these accolades for it. How would you feel? It hurts. It's hard. And your self-concept is thereafter shaped by it. And so we have to acknowledge these things. We have to name these things, because as we always say on the show, you can't heal from what you never reveal. You can't recover from what you don't address. And so here we are naming it. Yeah,
so that sounds like that's a really good one to wrap up on.
Think so?
I think you dropped the mic on that one. Boom.
Well, thank you guys for listening.
Thank you so much. Always tune in. Please review us on iTunes. We're on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, everywhere. Thanks for tuning in. Oh, and always send us questions. Go to our awesome website, theblackunconscious.com. Click the Ask Us button in the top and send us questions. All right. Thank you.